And yeah, I'm not in Glastonbury at all today. I'm actually more than 200 miles away from Glastonbury. I'm staying with my parents on their farm in Cambridgeshire. And as this is the rune, which falls and marks the point of harvest, the first harvest, Lammas, I was kind of expecting that it was going to be warm and sunny, and I was going to be sat by the river on a lovely warm sunny evening. But no, I'm stuck under an oak tree and it's raining, and the weather forecast says it's going to be raining for the next few days. So harvest is well and truly called off, and I am under a tree. But I'm very grateful to this tree for providing me with the shelter here. And yeah, so today we're going to be talking about the rune Thurisaz. Now, Thurisaz is a Germanic name. In Old Norse it's Thurs, probably said that wrong, and in Anglo-Saxon it's thorn. So the traditional meaning of this rune is, well, Thurisaz is actually the very ancient name for the god Thor, or Thunnor. So in the same vein as Tiwaz is a very ancient name for the god Tyr, and Wodenez is a very ancient name for the god Woden, this is a very ancient name for the god Thor. So this is the third rune in the Futhark and the second rune in the Uthark. This runic half month started on the 29th of July and actually runs through until the 12th of August. So the peak of this rune was on the 5th of August. Today it's the 7th of August, which is actually exactly halfway between the summer solstice and the autumnal equinox. So we've just reached that southwestern point on the wheel. It's 3 o'clock if you're looking at the wheel as a 24-hour clock. So as I mentioned, this is the rune of the first harvest, or Lammas as it's known in Anglo-Saxon. Now, interesting to note, there is actually no evidence, no firm evidence to support the fact that Lammas was a festival worshipped by pagan Anglo-Saxons. And speaking of pagan Anglo-Saxons, it's just interesting to note that I'm very, very close, a couple of 100 yards from a burial site of pagan Anglo-Saxons. So anyway, that's I digress. But yeah, so there's actually no evidence at all that Lammas was celebrated as a pagan festival. Bede doesn't mention it, and the suffix mass has only ever been associated with Christian festivals, never with pagan ones. So, you know, Lammas generally falls on the 1st of August. There is evidence for the Celtic festival of Runester, but not actually for Lammas. So this month, the Anglo-Saxons called August Weodmonath, which means weed month. And you know, this time of year there's loads of weeds. It's kind of like the grass seeds. The grass has seeded and they've all grown up again, and there seems to be like there's sort of an extra spurt of life at the moment with the trees, and yeah, the weeds have all gone a bit crazy. So you can kind of see why the Anglo-Saxons did call this weed month, or Weodmonath. So Thurisaz, the rune Thurisaz, which is here. Oh, I bet you can't even see that because it's so dark under this tree. It's crazy dark. This is a rune that gets really bad press, and you'll see why when I read the rune poems to you. But this is a rune that, you know, when it comes up you kind of think, oh dear, what's going on here? But so it is considered to be one of the darker runes, or the rocker runes, but of course it's true to say that no rune is completely dark or completely light. There are elements of light and dark in every rune. And so as well as being connected with the god Thor, this rune is also connected with his enemies, the Thursars, the giants. So of course, when we think about Thor, Thor was born of a giant mother. His mother is Jord, the earth goddess, you know, Mother Earth, who was seen as a Jotun or a Thurs, probably a Jotun in mythology. And of course, Thor was fathered by Odin. So what you could say is that this rune is a kind of a blend of the unconscious, raw, primal energies of the giants and the conscious power of spirit. So maybe that's one way of looking at it. And I kind of find it really interesting how these things happen. Because I am under the oak tree, my face is kind of half in shadow and half in light. So this is kind of very much what this rune is like. You've kind of got the dark primal energies of the Thursars, and then the light of the kind of the conscious, the spirit represented by Thor. So if we look at its position in the rune row or the rune wheel, it's flanked by Uruz, which, as I told you last time, is a rune of primal unconscious instincts, and Ansus, which is very much a rune of consciousness. So Thurisaz is kind of sitting somewhere in the middle of these two. So here we kind of have a blending of the unconscious power of the Thursars with the conscious powers of Thor. So of course, in northern mythology, the Thursars, the giants, they represented the natural forces of chaos. So they always appear in the myths as being antagonistic to the gods. But they are simply primal, earthy powers. They shouldn't be looked, you know, they are neither good nor bad. And of course the concept of good and evil is not something which appears in the mythology. It's very much a kind of a Christian way of looking on things. You know, they are simply other, I suppose you could say. And of course, in the same ways that we can see the Thursars, the giants, being responsible for bringing about Ragnarok and the end of that world, which then made way for the creation of a new world. You know, these forces of chaos, they drive things forward. And if we look to Loki, you know, Loki is used within the Norse myths as a means to bring the story on. Without chaos there is no progress. Without chaos there is stagnation. So you can see that these forces of chaos are needed. So let's look at Thor. Thor, that wonderful red-bearded, big, manly god of the Aesir, the protector of Asgard, the protector of Midgard, often off in the east, fighting with the Jotnar. So he really was seen as the protector of the ordered cosmos against the forces of chaos, destruction and entropy. And of course you need to remember that Thor is actually 3/4 giant himself, because his mum was a giant and his dad was half a giant. So there's nobody better really to take on those chaotic forces than Thor himself. And of course Thor's most famous possession is Mjolnir, his hammer. And I've got one of mine on here. I rarely go anywhere without it. And Mjolnir, it has roots in the word which mean lightning, but also in Russian it kind of translates as grinder, and you'll see why. So yeah, so this, you know, if we think of this as lightning, so Thor really is all about protection. One of the names he was given was Thor Fjorgensson, which basically means, it translates as Thor, son of earth. And of course he was the son of earth, he was the son of Jord. So you can see his mission, his life mission, as being to protect his mother, to protect the earth. Now he lived in a hall called Vilskina, I can never pronounce that, and that is actually a poetic metaphor for lightning. I wouldn't be at all surprised if we get some lightning actually. So If we do, I'm probably completely the wrong place under an oak tree, but we'll see. And Thor lived, and Bill Skinner was in Thrudvanga, which translates as power field. So here we can see some very interesting things coming through, connected with electromagnetism. So could the whole story of Thor be a poetic metaphor for electromagnetism, which of course protects the earth against things coming in, and it then kind of grinds them up and deflects them away? So Maria Kulberg, Lady of the Labyrinth, has done a very interesting talk on this, which you can see on YouTube, and I won't steal her thunder, pardon the pun, but do check that out. It's really interesting, and it does kind of really help you to understand the protective properties of the god Thor. And of course this rune can very much be used for protection, but it has a different kind of energy to algaes, which is also one of the key protective runes. So let's talk about regeneration and fertility, because these are aspects of this rune. Now, lightning fertilizes the soil, and Thor was worshipped by farmers, so that's why it's kind of really appropriate that I am here on my dad's farm under an oak tree. And of course the oak tree is also sacred to Thor, so it kind of feels very Thorish at the moment, I have to say. There's a lot of Thor energy. So how does that work? Well, it's a process which is called atmospheric nitrogen fixation. Basically the power of the lightning breaks down the nitrogen molecules in the air. Now some of these then join with oxygen to combine to basically form nitrates. I'm not a scientist, so I'll try and get this right. Some of those then mix with the rain, so when that rain falls on the ground, it's basically a fertiliser. Now these days my dad's barn just over there is absolutely stuffed with big bags of nitrogen fertiliser, but for our ancestors having fertilising rain would have been a real treat. So you can really see why Thor was worshipped so much by farmers, apart from the fact he's just cool as well. So I'm just going to read you a little bit now that was written by Hilda Ellis Davidson, who's a very a scholar that if you haven't checked her out then you really should. And this is what she said about Mjolnir. It would seem indeed as though the power of the thunder god, symbolised by his hammer, extended over all that had to do with the well-being of the community. It covered birth, marriage and death, burial and cremation ceremonies, weapons and feasting, travelling, land-taking, and the making of oaths between men. The famous weapon of Thor was not only the symbol of the destructive power of the storm and of fire from heaven, but also a protection against the forces of evil and violence. Without it, Asgard could no longer be guarded against the giants, and men relied on it also to give security and to support the rule of law. So you can see from this section here by Hilda Ellis Davidson that in ancient times the hammer would have been seen to have been used for hallowing, blessing of all different things, and was very much connected with marriage and other forms of fertility. So now I'm going to read to you the Norwegian rune poem, and you can see what I mean about this getting a bad press based on the rune poems. Giant causes anguish to women, misfortune makes few men cheerful. Okay, and now the Icelandic rune poem. Thurs, torment of women and cliff dweller and husband of a giantess. So I don't think we have enough time to go into those completely, but what is all this torment and anguish to women? Now, I've been thinking about this one, and it's true to say that this is a rune with a very male, very masculine energy. This definitely has a male polarity. And of course we already know that it has associations with fertility. So could this possibly be to do with pregnancy? Now these days if you are pregnant, then you are fairly certain that you will not die during that process. But not so for our ancestors, not so at all. Pregnancy and childbirth would have been a risky business for women back in the day, before all the modern things that we have now. So, and it probably wouldn't have been very comfortable, and probably would have caused quite a lot of torment and anguish, and possibly death as well. Could this be what it's referring to? I don't know, but it's just a theory that I'm putting forward. See what you think. And of course we also do have to take into account the aggressive nature of this rune. This is a rune which has aggressive energies to it, and of course it's about conflict. We're looking at Thor was always in aggressive conflict with the Thursars. There was always conflict going on here. So this is a rune with aggression connected to it. And of course we also have connections of male sexuality. So if this is perhaps hinting at aggressive male sexuality, then this could be something that the rune poems are speaking of. Cool. Anyway, sorry, I just thought how much like the goddess Hela I look with one dark side of the face. Anyway, who is of course a giant. Now this rune can also be about a heightening sense of eroticism, but this rune you have to always look at the warning with this rune, and as well as bringing pleasure, this could also bring pain. Now let's have a look at the Anglo-Saxon rune poem, because the Anglo-Saxons took this in a different direction. They called it thorn. Now its shape, and I don't know if you can even see this, its shape, oh well maybe you can, is kind of reminiscent of a thorn. And it's true to say the brambles at this time of year have gone crazy. I've been caught on brambles as I scrambled to get under this oak tree. The brambles are just everywhere at the moment. They're really crazy. So it does kind of tie in with the time of year. But the Anglo-Saxon rune poem says, "The thorn is exceedingly sharp, an evil thing for any knight to touch, uncommonly severe and all who sit among them." So with the thorn, again here we're seeing elements of protection. Now I'm just going to read to you from the Poetic Edda, the Fafnismál 43. "On the mountain sleeps a battle maid, and about her plays the bane of the wood. Ig with the thorn hath smitten her thus, for she felled the fighter he fain would save." So this goes back to Sigdrifa, and about how Odin, Ig, used a sleep thorn to make her fall into an enchanted sleep. And around her grew up a forest of brambles. Now, what does this make you think of? Sleeping Beauty, isn't it? And you've always got to look to the fairy stories within your culture to get to the hidden meanings. So of course, again, Sleeping Beauty, she was pricked by a spindle. She falls into an enchanted sleep. A forest of trees and brambles grows up around her, protecting her. So again, here we're seeing very clearly protection coming through. Now if this rune comes up in divination, you do have to beware of trouble coming from outside. Now obviously the Thursars were in Utgard, the outside. It's trouble, it's chaos coming from outside. So if this comes up, you may have to look to outside of yourself, outside of your immediate circle of family and friends, things coming from the outside which can threaten your world. But be careful how you react to these. You may find that you react in an overly aggressive way. It can be about knee-jerk reactions, you know, those unconscious instinctual reactions that you have to things that could perhaps be overly aggressive. But of course we have to remember that chaos can lead to new possibilities. As I've said, without chaos there is stagnation. With stagnation there is no growth. So this can be about having the courage to go out into the unknown, to face that unknown and master it. So there's an awful lot of power in this rune. an awful lot of power. It can be used as a catalyst. It can be used as a catalyst when combined with other runes to give them that extra power. Now, this rune is one of the runes most used in cursing. Be careful if you use it though. It can so easily backfire on you. I speak from experience. You do have to be careful with how you use it. Definitely you do. And I just want you to, I don't know if I can show you this room because it's so dark in here, but oh, I don't know if I can, you know, it's so dark. I'll tell you what. Oh no, I'm going to have to give up. Oh look, put it on my cheek. There, okay. So look at it that way. See how you feel about it. But then what I want you to do is invert it and look at it that way. I don't know if I've done this the right way. But put it the other way and you'll feel completely differently about it. It feels very, very different. Just give it a go. Now, because I've been a bit of a muppet, I've gone and left my drum in Glastonbury, haven't I? So there's no drumming today. So I'm improvising with sticks. So I'm just going to do the chanting now to try to invoke the energies of Thurisaz in its protective aspect, hopefully. And I do feel very protected at the moment, protected from this torrential rain underneath this lovely oak tree, which is of course sacred to Thor. So I ask for Thor's blessings as I do this. So let's see what happens. Thurisaz, 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 Thurisaz. Thurisaz, 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 Thurisaz. Okay. Oh, I feel very strange now. I don't know what was going on inside my head, but it was like I kept seeing, it was like lightning going around my head, or I kept seeing these bright white flashes. Yeah. Oh, I feel a bit spaced out now, actually. I think I need to go and have a cup of tea. Bring myself back down to the ground. But anyway, thank you, bits of wood, for him standing in for my drum. And thank you for joining me under an oak tree at the midpoint between the summer solstice and the autumnal equinox in the rain. So only a couple more runes to do, and then I have been all the way round the runic wheel. So do join me next time for Ansuz, at which point I'll probably be back in Glastonbury. And yeah, do subscribe, and I will catch you next time. So blessings of Thor. Okay, bye bye.